How long do you think gambling has actually been legal in Las Vegas? Most people guess forever. The real number is 26 years out of the city's first 120. For 21 of those years, right up until construction started on the Hoover Dam, gambling in Las Vegas was completely illegal. For most of the 20th century so far, this city has actually been legal for gambling less often than it's been banned. This wasn't a casino town yet. For most of its history, it wasn't really a gambling town at all. It was a desert water stop, then a ranch, then a railroad junction, and only right at the very end, a place where the state legalized vice specifically to cash in on dam construction workers. Erase the modern strip entirely, every hotel tower, fountain, and billboard, and what's left underneath tells a much older and stranger story. A fort built by religious missionaries sits buried under what's now a small state park, just blocks from the strip today. A gunfight over a ranch decided who controlled the only reliable water for miles around. And the natural spring that gave this whole city its name dried up decades ago, though almost nobody visiting today has ever heard of it. I dug through old land auction records, mission diaries, and early census data, and used AI to reconstruct what this place actually looked like before the dam changed everything. By 1930, the year before Hoover Dam construction began in earnest, Las Vegas had about 5,000 people. Reno was bigger. Most maps of the time barely bothered to mark it. On Christmas Day, 1829, a New Mexican trading caravan of 60 men and 100 mules stopped about 100 miles northeast of where Las Vegas sits today, out of water. A young scout named Rafael Rivera rode off from the main group looking for a way through. He got separated, and for close to 2 weeks, nobody knew what happened to him. He'd found something worth the wait. Rivera had stumbled onto a valley full of artesian springs and wild grass growing straight out of the desert floor. He led the caravan back to it, and the route became part of the old Spanish Trail. Cottonwood and mesquite trees lined the water. Wild grass grew thick enough to graze livestock, and birds gathered around pools that stayed wet year-round, all of it sitting in the middle of an otherwise brutal stretch of desert. They named the spot Las Vegas, Spanish for the meadows, after grass that doesn't exist there anymore. What strikes me most is that the whole city is still named after grass and water that vanished decades ago, long before anyone built a single casino. Word got around. Wagon trains and traders used the springs as a resting point for the next couple of decades. In 1844, explorer John C. Fremont camped there too, and his reports helped put the springs on official American maps for the first time. The springs themselves fed a marshy little wetland barely a few acres wide, an almost absurd contrast to the sand and creosote bush stretching out in every direction around it. Nobody built anything permanent at Las Vegas Springs for another 11 years. That changed in June 1855. 30 Mormon missionaries arrived that month, sent from Salt Lake City to build a way station roughly halfway along the trail to Southern California. Their leader, William Bringhurst, had orders to build something sturdy enough to double as a fort if it ever needed to be one. Over the following months, using adobe brick made from mud dug right out of the valley floor, they built a square structure with walls 150 feet long and 14 feet high. Each brick was mixed and shaped by hand on the valley floor, then left to bake in the desert sun before it ever touched a wall. The walls themselves weren't uniform. They tapered from 2 feet wide at the base down to 1 foot at the top, putting the mass where the structure needed it most and shedding weight as they rose. For 100 miles in any direction, it was the largest building around. The finished compound enclosed 8 separate 2-story rooms inside those walls, with a small spring-fed creek routed directly through the courtyard for drinking water and irrigation. Missionaries also ran it as a post office and trading post, a supply stop for travelers still pushing on toward the California gold fields. What actually happens to a religious mission when the harvest fails and the neighbors turn hostile? It falls apart fast. Crops didn't take to the desert soil the way anyone hoped. A side expedition sent to mine lead in the nearby mountains failed outright, draining resources the mission couldn't spare, and relations with the local Paiute worsened at the same time. Leadership inside the mission itself started fracturing too. By 1857, less than 2 years after they arrived, the church recalled its missionaries, and the fort sat empty. It still gets me that the oldest building in Nevada sits a few blocks from a casino floor today, and almost nobody walking by outside knows it's there. In 1865, a miner named Octavius Decatur Gass moved into the abandoned fort and started rebuilding it as a working ranch. Gass turned the old mission into a genuine operation. He planted orchards, grew grapes for wine, dug irrigation off the same springs, and built a store and blacksmith shop to serve travelers and miners passing through on their way to the mountains. By 1876, his holdings had grown to nearly 1,000 acres. Paiute laborers did much of the actual work in those orchards and fields, in an arrangement that gave Gass cheap labor and gave local families at least some access to the water that had once been entirely their own. Expansion outpaced his finances. In 1881, after bad weather wrecked a harvest he'd counted on, Gass defaulted on a $5,000 loan from a Pioche businessman named Archibald Stewart, who foreclosed and took the ranch. Stewart didn't get to enjoy it for long. He was shot and killed in a dispute with a rival ranch 2 years after taking over, leaving his wife, Helen Stewart, to run the entire operation herself. Helen Stewart didn't just hold on to the ranch. She expanded it to 1,800 acres over the next 2 decades, becoming one of the most significant landowners in the entire valley. Locals eventually took to calling her the First Lady of Las Vegas, a nod to just how much of the valley's early development traced back to land she'd managed alone for 2 decades. In 1902, a railroad senator named William Clark came calling. His San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad needed a reliable water source roughly halfway along a new line connecting the 2 cities, and Stewart Springs were exactly what he needed. She sold. The sale didn't just transfer land, it set up everything that came next. Clark's railroad didn't just sell land, it sold a town that was already half assembled before the auction even opened. By May 15, 1905, the railroad's own subsidiary, the Las Vegas Land and Water Company, had already laid out 110 acres in a 5-by-6 block grid, staked 1,200 lots, and put up roughly 150 buildings alongside the tracks before a single parcel changed hands. The water infrastructure came first. The company controlled the artesian wells that made the whole site viable, and buyers knew it. When the auction opened, several thousand people arrived by train from Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. Residential lots started at $100. The best corner slots on Fremont Street ran as high as $750, with 3 prime intersections at Fremont and Main fetching $1,750 apiece. By the time bidding closed, 176 lots had sold for a combined $79,566. Some winners broke ground that same evening. What went up first tells you exactly what this town was built around. The railroad's own water tower and depot went in before anything else. The whole grid oriented itself around those 2 structures. Canvas tents and quick wood frame buildings followed within days, false front facades that looked taller than they actually were, designed to project permanence to a population that wasn't sure this settlement would last. The Las Vegas Land and Water Company incorporated formally that same year to manage the artesian wells under pressure to every lot, the first real utility infrastructure the site had. By October, an oil-fired generator at the local ice plant was supplying electricity. Ice first, light second in that order of priority for a desert town in summer, Within a year, the wood frames were giving way to brick on the main commercial blocks. The Hotel Nevada opened on Fremont Street in 1906, still standing today as the Golden Gate, the first structure built to last rather than to serve. McWilliams' rival town site on the other side of the tracks never matched the pace. It lacked what Clark's side controlled from day one: the water. A red light district known as Block 16 grew up almost immediately alongside the legitimate businesses, serving railroad workers and miners with saloons, gambling tables, and brothels that operated more or less in the open. That openness didn't last. Nevada outlawed gambling statewide in 1910, right as Las Vegas was still finding its footing as an incorporated city. The ban fit a broader wave of reform sweeping the West at the time, the same reforming instinct that pushed through nationwide prohibition less than a decade later. Las Vegas became an official city on June 1, 1911, after residents voted 168 to 57 in favor of incorporation. Peter Boole became its first mayor. For the next 2 decades, Las Vegas stayed almost exactly what it started as: a railroad town, nothing more. Its repair shops employed most of the working population. Fremont Street didn't even get paved until 1925. A welcome arch went up over Main and Fremont in 1929, mostly to greet the handful of tourists passing through on the new highways. Downtown still looked much the way it had in 1905, just with a few more brick buildings mixed in among the wood frame originals, hitching posts standing next to the occasional automobile, and open desert starting again within 2 or 3 blocks of Fremont Street in any direction.
Honestly, that 21-year gap is the detail that surprises me most. Gambling in Las Vegas was flat out illegal for longer than most of today's casinos have even existed.
If you stepped off the train sometime in 1929, this is roughly what greeted you. Fremont Street ran a few blocks straight out from the depot, the only paved road in the entire city, finished just 4 years earlier in 1925. A steel arch stretched across it near Main Street, strung with light bulbs spelling out the city's name, installed that same year mostly for civic pride, rather than any real tourist trade. Storefronts along Fremont ran 1 and 2 stories tall, a patchwork of brick fronts slowly replacing the original wood frame buildings left over from 1905. Block 16, a short walk from the depot, kept its saloons and gambling rooms running quietly despite the statewide ban. More open secret than actual secret. Walk 2 or 3 blocks off Fremont in any direction, and the pavement simply stopped. Hard-packed dirt roads took over, then open desert scrub, creosote bush, and the occasional Joshua tree stretching toward the spring mountains on the horizon. The whole downtown core could be walked end-to-end in under 15 minutes. Nothing stood taller than 3 stories. There was no strip yet, not even the concept of one. That stretch of highway south of downtown was still just open desert road, more than a decade away from its first casino resort. Population hovered just over 5,000 people, 5,165 by the 1930 census, smaller than plenty of small towns nobody's ever heard of, and small enough that most residents could plausibly recognize each other on sight. None of that stopped Congress from noticing the Colorado River 30 miles away. In 1928, Congress passed the Boulder Canyon Project Act, authorizing a massive dam on the Colorado. Construction contracts went out in 1931, awarded to a consortium called 6 companies for just under $49 million. 6 companies was itself a consortium, 6 separate construction firms from around the West pooling resources, because no single company wanted to risk a project this size alone. Almost overnight, the sleepy railroad town became a magnet. Workers poured into the region faster than anyone could house them, first crowding into a tent and scrap metal camp on the canyon floor, nicknamed Ragtown, where summer temperatures topped 116 degrees, and dozens died from heat in the first season alone. Temperatures on the canyon floor sometimes reached 130 degrees during the day, hot enough that workers described standing waist-deep in the river on breaks just to survive their shifts. Most had driven or hitchhiked in from across a country still deep in the Depression, chasing rumors of steady federal paychecks in the middle of the desert. The federal government tried to get ahead of it, building a planned company town called Boulder City to house workers properly. Officials banned alcohol, gambling, and prostitution there entirely, treating it as a model community rather than a frontier boomtown. Why would a cash-strapped desert state legalize something most of the country still considered a sin? Money. Nevada's government, staring down the Great Depression, saw an opportunity nobody wanted to miss. In March 1931, the same year dam construction began, Governor Fred Balzer signed a bill making wide-open casino gambling legal across the entire state. Lawmakers paired the gambling bill with another change the same year, cutting the residency requirement for divorce down to 6 weeks, betting that both vice and quick divorces could pull in tourist dollars a farming and mining economy no longer could. On April 2, 1931, Clark County granted its first 8 gambling licenses, including one to the Northern Club right on Fremont Street. Block 16 kept right on operating too, now serving thousands of dam workers instead of a few dozen railroad men. I can't get over the timing on that one. The same year Washington banned vice in its own company town, Nevada legalized it 25 miles down the road. Boulder City workers made the dusty 30-mile drive into Las Vegas every payday, specifically because their own town wouldn't let them gamble or drink. The desert water stop that Rafael Rivera had stumbled onto exactly 102 years earlier was about to become something else entirely. 6 companies itself had little say in the matter. Federal rules governing Boulder City were written in Washington, and Las Vegas was close enough and unregulated enough to absorb whatever demand the company town refused to serve. By the time Hoover Dam was dedicated in 1935, the city's population had grown to more than 8,000, and it kept climbing well past that in the years right after. None of that growth showed up overnight in the skyline either. The Strip's first proper resort, El Rancho Vegas, wouldn't open until 1941, a full decade after the dam's construction contract was signed. None of the ranch, the fort, or the original railroad grid looked anything like what came next. The old Mormon fort's surviving adobe wall is now protected inside a small state park downtown, the oldest standing structure in Nevada, sitting in the shadow of buildings 100 times its size. Rafael Rivera's springs stopped flowing decades ago as groundwater pumping drained the valley's aquifer, though the site is preserved today as the Springs Preserve, a park built around water that no longer exists. What this whole reconstruction really proves is that Las Vegas spent well over a century being defined by water, railroads, and ranching. The city didn't choose gambling. Gambling arrived because a federal construction project needed somewhere for its workforce to spend money, and Nevada happened to be desperate enough to say yes. If you want to see what the springs and the old fort actually look like today, both sites are open to the public downtown. Hit subscribe if you want more forgotten histories like this one, and tell me in the comments which city's hidden past I should explore next.